Hey everyone, welcome to the Backstage Classical Career Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Stroud, and I'm a classical violinist who started playing at the age of 3. I graduated from the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer University with my bachelor's in violin performance, and I'm pursuing my master's in music at the University of Michigan. In this series, I invite esteemed classical musicians onto the show and interview them to tell their stories and give advice to share with others and preserve their legacies. Today, I'm interviewing Sarah Ying Ma, violinist from the Poiesis Quartet that just won first prize and the commission prize of the 2025 Banff International String Quartet Competition. In 2023, they were the Grand Prize and Lift Every Voice prize winners of the Fischoff National Chamber Music Competition and the gold medal and BIPOC winners of the 2023 St. Paul's String Quartet Competition. In May of 2024, Poiesis joined the Concert Artists Guild roster for North American management. The Poiesis Quartet focuses on expanding the string quartet repertoire with vibrant new works by emerging composers. Their 2024 debut album, As We Are, on the Bright Shiny Things label, features world premiere recordings with mezzo-soprano Nancy Maltzby. They have presented several world premieres of works by composers, and their commission of String Quartet No. 7 by Kevin Lau received its world premiere in 2025. Poiesis has completed multiple international residencies and is currently the graduate quartet in residence at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, studying under the Ariel Quartet. As graduates of Oberlin College and Conservatory, they were previously mentored by Sibby Bernhardsen and members of the Verona Quartet. Sarah Ying Ma is pursuing an artist diploma at the University of Cincinnati's CCM. Sarah was named a Performance Today Young Artist in Residence and is the second prize winner of the Dallas International Violin Competition. In 2024, Sarah was accepted as a semifinalist in both the solo and ensemble divisions of the Concert Artists Guild and later advanced to the finals with Poiesis. As a soloist, Sarah has performed internationally with the Dallas Chamber Symphony, Ensemble 212, and many more. Sarah was featured on NPR's From the Top and was a winner of the National Young Arts Competition. They have attended Heifetz International Music Institute in Kneisel Hall and was a Dorothy Richards Darling Fellow at the Aspen Music Festival. After transferring from undergraduate studies at the Juilliard School, Sarah now holds a BM in violin performance from Oberlin Conservatory, where they studied with Sibby Bernhardsen. Thank you so much for joining me today on my podcast. I'm very honored to have you here. Can you talk a little bit about your musical background?
Yeah, I started playing violin when I was about 7 or so. Nobody else in my family really did music, so I think I very quickly enjoyed it because I was the only one who was playing violin for a while. I started going to MSM pre-college when I was 9, and then I switched over to Juilliard pre-college when I was 14, and then I started studying at the Juilliard College Division, transferred over after about a year and a half studying there to Oberlin Conservatory. And then I graduated early from Oberlin Conservatory after about 2 years or something to study at CCM at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music with my quartet, Poiesis Quartet. So I'm doing my artist diploma there right now.
Amazing, yeah. And can you talk a little bit about how your time at Juilliard and Oberlin and now CCM has affected you and helped you develop as a musician?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful for my formative years in pre-college. I think it's an opportunity and a privilege that a lot of musicians don't get, and having exposure to that really intense and very difficult period at a very young age was really, really essential for my growth in college, because then everything felt easier than it actually was later on, because I'd handled worse at a younger age, which is really, really nice. I think that rigor prepared me really well. And then in college, I was especially fortunate at Oberlin to be exposed to so many other departments and genres of music. Oberlin has a really lovely contemporary music ensemble, and that was where I first started playing really music by living composers and developed a strong interest in contemporary works. And then during my time at Oberlin, I was actually a double degree student in comparative American studies, but
Okay.
because of the quartet, I had to drop my other study to graduate early, so I ended up leaving with 2 minors. But my research and work in the college was really pivotal in my development as a musician, because it really taught me how robust performing arts is and how many influences go into the music that we make. Yeah, and especially from a pedagogical perspective, I became very interested in teaching and education as a result of my academic studies at Oberlin. So Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. So, how did Poiesis form at Oberlin, and how did you decide on that name for the group?
Yeah, we formed in the fall of 2022, because I had just transferred over to Oberlin in the spring of 22, and my first semester there, I was really lacking a strong chamber group, and, I had the idea I wanted to have, like, a quartet next year. I wanted to do some competitions, and, through a mutual friend, I knew Drew, our cellist, and so I reached out to him, and we started planning for a group for the following year, and he connected me with Jasper, our violist, and then I connected us with Max because Max was part of my studio at Oberlin, and then we just randomly kind of got together and read some music and just fell into place randomly. I had never met Jasper or Drew before in my life. I'd never played with Max before in my life. Yeah, we just kind of winged it, and we were like, just trusted that everybody was good at what they do. Started playing together in the fall for the advanced quartet seminar at Oberlin. And the name is a Greek word. It means to create something new, and especially to make something new from nothing. And I had discovered this term when I was a student at Juilliard and taking classes at Columbia University, and I took this amazing philosophy course that was very centered around this idea of a social poiesis, and for marginalized people especially to grow and develop new communities, structures, ideologies, and create worlds of their own. And yeah, it was really enticing and beautiful, and a very exciting concept to me in an artistic perspective as well. And I was very drawn to the word. I spent like a year fixating on it. And then when the opportunity came for us to choose a quartet name, I was like, I want this to be Poiesis. And yeah, and everybody liked it. I don't think we came to understand the word better as we kept playing together, and as especially the others researched it more. And it's really interesting how much our quartet's mission and work has grown into this idea of poiesis, even though most of us didn't know what it was before we named the group.
Yeah, that's super inspiring. And I love that ideology and everything that your group does to kind of support that ideology as well. Who have been some significant mentors of the group, and in what ways have they helped you?
Yeah, our biggest and most pivotal mentor, I think, was Sibi Bernardson, who is on the faculty at Oberlin Conservatory and was a former member of the Pacifica Quartet. He was the first and our primary coach when we were students, but even now continues to really be a big part of our development, I guess. And we
Mm.
coached with him a lot before Banff, and he is just a big mentor in my personal life as well. I feel indebted to him a lot. So I always bring him up first. For me personally, I worked a lot with Don Weilerstein, who was also a big mentor for me at Juilliard and really taught me to grow into my own sound as a musician. And then there's also teachers at CCM who we've worked with, including Kristen Lee, the violinist, Ayane Kozasa, who's now in the Kronos Quartet, Nick Fotinos from Eighth Blackbird, and also the Ariel Quartet, who we work with at CCM more primarily. Yeah, and there's so many people who have pitched in to make us who we are. Also, the Verona Quartet, who's in residence at Oberlin, were really important to us in our first year together.
Yeah, amazing mentors for sure. So, Poiesis has won quite a few competitions now, including the Banff, which you just won. So huge congratulations for that. That's amazing. What is your take, and what is the group's take on competitions? And do you have plans on competing in the future?
We do not have any more plans to do competitions. Of course, it might happen one day, who knows, but nothing that we're planning rep for or anything.
Mhm.
We're quite busy with what happens after BAFs.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, competitions, I think I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the group, but for me personally, I never viewed competitions as something that I felt was necessary to the growth of an artist. I think it can help for sure. And I think there are aspects of especially the preparation and the performance experience that are really important for young artists. But I think that as society stands today, there's a lot of unhealthy dynamics that come from competing. And I never thought that I would be like a competition winner because I never imagined myself doing large international competitions like these. But for us, it was, I think, more exciting as a quartet because the environments are much more friendly in chamber music than they are for soloists.
Yeah.
And Banff is a wonderfully supportive environment, especially for their artists and competitors. They provide lodging, food, and a nice stipend for your time there. So attending doesn't feel like a huge sacrifice. It feels like a learning opportunity. And that's really important. And I don't think that most other competitions in the world have those types of opportunity, like those resources for their competitors.
Mhm.
So it was very special to do BAM. But yeah, I don't personally think that it's a necessary path to take. But if you are fortunate, as we have been, to win awards, it can definitely help a lot.
And speaking of Banff, how did your group choose its program, and how did you prepare for the competition?
Yeah, a lot of the repertoire is music that we've been working on for some time. We're actually a very young group, so we've only been together since the fall of 22. So we haven't run into enough time to pick up a lot of repertoire.
Yeah.
A lot of the requirements for Banff, like the 21st century work, 21st century works were relatively easy for us to pick up because we love new music and we play a lot of it, and we could freely choose music that we express. But then there were requirements like the Haydn or the Romantic Round or the movement of Beethoven or Schubert and things like that that were very daunting to us. And,
Mhm.
of course, also the 20th century round with the Bartoks and things like that. So we made the decision to choose repertoire that was more familiar to us for a lot of that canon, those canon things. So the Bartok Five, the Brahms, which you heard when when we
Yes.
played at Off, and yeah, so that was from way back, which I guess is actually only 2 years ago. Yeah, so that music was very familiar for us. But contemporary repertoire has a really special meaning behind it. And think we were super intentional with how we programmed thematically from a story based perspective and a very emotional perspective. So in the final round, for example, we had a whole program of works by BIPOC composers, including one piece that we had commissioned ourselves. And that was a really meaningful program for us, and it was very nice and special for us to play in the first iteration of Banff, where all the competitors who are get into the finals get to choose their own program. So,
Yeah.
there was a very in-depth discussion for what we would play for that round. If you're curious about it, I could I could
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
Um, yeah, it was based, thematically around the 7th String Quartet by Kevin Lau, who was the composer we commissioned,
Mhm.
and he's a Chinese-Canadian composer, and he's absolutely incredible. He writes very cinematic music that,
Mm.
is also very individualistic, like, it highlights moving lines and individual voices very strongly. So, we really loved him and wanted to work with him and commissioned him, and the piece revolves around his experience with his, family and the birth of his new son, who was diagnosed as a newborn with a rare liver disease, and through navigating that familial trauma, hardship, and pain, he composed this piece for us that explores these ideas of grief, healing, gratitude, and love, and community as well. And it's called Surfacing. And it's such a beautiful work of music. And we built this 45-minute program from it. So the works that were paired with it really fall in line with that thematically and musically. So we opened with Jared Tate's Pisachi, which opens with like a serene desert sunrise type of sound, and it gets really gritty and has a lot of dance inspiration from Hopi and Pueblo dances, and that like almost like rock and roll sound comes through a little bit,
Mhm.
and then it was followed by Brian Raphael Neighbors, who composed a string quartet that we gave the world premiere of about a year ago. And his quartet he describes as the universe before the Big Bang. So it has a lot of chaos and moving parts and jagged patterns and lots of subidos. And so that shattering landscape was like the center point of this program, where you feel like everything is devastated and there's nowhere to go, but then from that emerged the third piece we played, which was the second movement of Joe Hisaishi's string quartet. He's the Japanese film composer for all the Ghibli movies.
Mhm.
Many people don't know he wrote a quartet, but it's a really lovely piece, very geometric and super different from his other music. And this movement that he wrote is based on a woodcut by a Dutch artist named MC Escher. And the music is just totally transformative. You imagine this phosphorescent sea is what it's titled, and you see the glimmers of the algae, and it gives you hope for what's coming. And then we end with Kevin's piece. So the whole program was a really emotional exploration of that grieving process that ultimately ends with a very celebratory call and very virtuosic and joyous passages for the violins, especially. But yeah, it was a lovely program to put together, and we're very lucky to have been able to do that for Banff.
Yeah. For sure. And it was an amazing performance that you guys put on, and I could really hear the emotion and how much you guys love the music and how much it meant to you. Very inspiring also that it was all new music. I think it's amazing what you guys are doing. And
Thank you.
once again, congratulations. So, last year you recorded an album with Nancy Maltzby. What was that process like and how did that project come about?
Yeah, it was brought to us a little bit by this amateur composer named Rick Stout. And he's actually the trombonist, I think a trombonist in the Cleveland Orchestra. And so he brought this piece to us and he was very excited about it. It was a song cycle that he had composed based on the letters that were written by the American author Willa Cather. And Willa wrote a lot about the beauty of the Great Plains in America. And she was a very essential author in American literature, especially by female authors. And she was actually a closeted lesbian.
Mhm.
And that is hidden inside of her letters. And she never went public really about it, although it was kind of common knowledge for fear of the repercussions on her career. So today, a lot of people are trying to bring back those letters and talk about her from a contemporary feminist perspective. And so this song cycle is really lovely. One of the songs is about her partner, Willa's partner. And it was a really interesting project that was brought to us. And we were like, oh my gosh, of course we would love to record something, you know? So we worked together with Rick, and as well as this other quartet by Clint Needham is also on the record. And Clint is a composer who's on the faculty of Baldwin Wallace University, which is close to Cleveland. And yeah, and it just kind of fell into place. We recorded relatively quickly, had a concert at Baldwin Wallace University, had a concert at the Rocky River Chamber Music Society in Ohio, and we recorded with the lovely producer Elaine Martoni. And she's incredible. She's won God knows how many Grammys. And it was such a really transformative experience for us to be able to work with her and to put out these world premiere recordings. And Nancy was singing on the song cycle, and Nancy's also absolutely wonderful and is also on the faculty at Baldwin Wallace. So yeah, lots of Ohio connections, and yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, Poiesis has done a lot of recording for this album and then also for competitions. Do you guys have like a process for recording? What's that like for the group?
I think it's different based on repertoire and also based on what we're recording for. I mean, the process for recording for a record is totally different for competition.
Mhm.
Because for competition, we're like doing 15 takes and we can't do edits or things like that. And so then we're just like, oh my God, this one's not good enough. This one's not good enough. And then we go over and over again. And compared to records where you take a couple takes, you choose the best one, and then you patch. And that's a really important process in the engineering stuff that I know nothing about. But yeah, so recording the album was really nice and fun because we went over and patched. And that was really interesting because we had never done that together before, especially not as a quartet.
Yeah.
And especially not as a quintet with a vocalist. So
Yeah.
it changed a lot of things, took a lot more time than we had expected. I think we had to add actually a couple days maybe. But yeah, it was lovely though. It was really fun, and there's many people around, and a producer who basically tells you everything that's wrong and tells you what to do. So so it's nice to be able to relax and trust somebody who knows more than I do. But when we record ourselves, it's a totally different story. Usually we'll do these takes and do as many as we can reasonably within how long we've booked, and then listen back and discuss
Yeah.
after the session for sake of time. Yeah, I think the difficulty is in the preparation and not in the recordings itself.
For sure. And what are rehearsals like for the Poiesis Quartet? How often do you rehearse, and how do you handle conflicts if you have them?
Also varies based on repertoire and schedule and things like that. Like leading up to Banff, we made a huge spreadsheet. Like I think it was in like April, we met with the Verona Quartet in Nova Scotia, and they were talking about their preparations for Banff, and we were very inspired. They had made a huge like Google spreadsheet, with exactly how many hours they have until competition day, and exactly like how much they would rehearse and what they would rehearse day to day. And so we made a mega spreadsheet too, a little bit less aggressive than theirs, but it was very helpful for us to, visualize how much preparation we need and how much we want, and then how much we actually have time for. And it was like maybe 30% of what we had hoped for. That really, I think, was a big kick for us, was this like rehearsal planning structure that we had never done really prior to Banff. So it definitely has changed the way that we rehearse and the way that we communicate. It's changed very rapidly over the last couple years, totally just based on what we're working towards. And yeah, in terms of conflict, I mean, every quartet has so much stuff to work through personally. And I mean, everybody describes it like a four-way marriage, and that's definitely true. It's also like sibling rivalries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you had to live with your three siblings, travel with them, rehearse with them all day, and then like you end up just getting into petty arguments.
Yeah.
It's like so many rehearsals where like we'll disagree on the same things. But then we have like different approaches, and then we're like arguing for like 2 hours about like one note. And then after 2 hours, we're just like, okay, you know what? Let's just play it. And then we play it and it's like it was fine. Or like
Yeah.
or like sometimes we'll like argue for like forever, and then eventually we get to the same place and we realize that we actually just had the same idea. And it was just like said in two different ways. But conflict resolution is very difficult. Apart from just like musical difficulties, there's also, of course, like dynamics at play within the group, just based on the way that our personalities clash. There's so many things that each of us do that the rest of us disagree with. And rehearsing together is just such a huge exercise in psychiatry, honestly.
Yeah.
Like we're each other's therapists all of the time, which is can be unhealthy. And I think that there's ways to recognize where that line is. And also you just need to be, I think, proactive about not necessarily like resolving every issue, but discussing things and having that open and honest conversation about like, hey, that thing that you did really pissed me off. And then figuring out why it pissed you off and how it affects others in the group. And then also identifying ways to move past that as an ensemble, as a collective. And then I think another big portion of conflict resolution isn't actually talking, but also just thinking on your own and like going back home and spending the hours and hours of time on your own time. Being like, well, what did I do wrong? And am I angry about this because I'm mad at my quartet mates? Or am I angry about this because I'm insecure? That's a big reckoning for people to realize. And it's like something that quartet musicians need to recognize very quickly is the ability to just be truthful with yourself. Like, was I really mad in rehearsal or was I just unprepared?
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the time, it's that second option.
Yeah.
And, or also the question of like, was I really angry at what this person said? Was I mad at the tone? And is it because of what they did? Or is it because I have, past traumas or I have past experience with other people that makes me think this way about what they're saying? And so those differences, I think, are important to assess on your own. And people don't give enough credit to personal work and introspection instead of just like conflict resolution, you know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Definitely good questions to ask yourself, especially if you're
Yeah,
part of a long-term group.
absolutely.
What has your residency at CCM been like?
It's been great. I mean, they provide us with the support that we need to be able to tour and to still keep studying and improving. We don't have to pay for tuition, which is lovely. And quartet residencies are really, most of the time, are very lovely because of that. We receive a stipend each year. So that's also very helpful just for groceries and, life things.
Yeah.
And to have that stability in a city where we know that we can go and regularly receive coachings or private lessons if we need to after or in between tours and things like that is very, very helpful. It feels like a home base to return to, and that consistency is really important for young groups. And I think that there should be so many more quartet programs in the country, but funding is so limited.
That's amazing that you guys have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, you guys do a lot of work with new music, and you mentioned commissioning from Kevin Lau. What do you think the importance of new music is in classical music in today's society and commissioning new works and working with living composers?
Yeah, I think it means different things for a lot of people. And I think there's many realms of new music that are more experimental maybe than others, and some realms that are more rooted in tradition. So there's like a lot of different ways people approach it. But for us, I think the importance in the contemporary repertoire is the stories that it can tell that are more relevant to the people that we are today, and especially for the generation to come. So we play a lot of really interesting music that is about people's or communities' histories, and sometimes more contemporary histories, and sometimes histories that don't get talked about or shared ever. So, for example, we have an upcoming commission with a composer who's also used to be on the faculty at Oberlin, but a composer named Jeff Scott. And that piece is going to be reckoning with LGBTQ resistance histories in the US. And we have also a commission project that's going to be premiered in March with 5 queer and trans people of color at Oberlin who are writing music, and each of them have totally different pieces. But one of them is by my really good friend Maya Iritzari Lambright, and their piece is really based on exploring safe havens for marginalized people, and it just weaves in traditions of different musical languages from their Puerto Rican background and sounds and landscapes of safety and reconciliation and love and community, it's safety and community. And that's really beautiful. And I think that those are stories that connect so many wider audiences, and not just audiences, but also just humans, like people who don't go to concerts. They hear this repertoire and it inspires them not necessarily to like be a classical musician but just to love music and be a part of making art. And I think ultimately that's a lot of what contemporary and alternative maybe music making is to connect with people in unexpected ways. And I think that unexpected connection is really essential because, everybody who hears a really good Beethoven quartet performance is moved by it, I'm sure. And I know so many people who are not typical classical audiences, and they hear classical music and they expect it to be a certain thing. Maybe they usually get it in a certain way and they're moved by it in a similar way every single time. But the beauty in new music is that it is so interpretable.
Yeah.
and um and I've just seen so many reactions from people and audiences who are like, I had no idea that this would make me feel this way. And I had no idea that this music would make me realize so many things from my childhood or from my past or from my family or communities and things like that. And I think it's because the repertoire is inspired and takes global traditions. And yeah, and I think that creates really compelling stories that are not typically shown or heard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So, and there might be a little overlap with this question, but I was wondering, you are my youngest interviewee on this podcast so far. So, I was wondering what you think that our generation can do to keep classical music relevant for the future and keep people coming to classical music concerts.
I think the best thing we can do is to not think of it as classical music. I think that it's not about, like, stigma around the idea of classical music, but I think that the obsession with maintaining classical music as a genre is what pulls us back, and that is what's unattractive to a lot of musicians and performers, is that there is, it's not just stigma. It is true that there's very elitist histories. There's very politically unreasonable or, like, difficult histories that are associated with classical performance, a lot of marginalization and suppression of minorities in the industry. That's not just a thing that's contemporary. That has a very long history behind it. I think recognizing that there is so much worth playing that is not just what we think of as classical music, and we can perform in classical settings and ensembles and with Western instruments and still present compelling art that doesn't necessarily have to be categorized as classical music. Um, there's a lot of people doing really interesting collaborative work with non-classical musicians, and I think people are very fast to label our quartet as a classical ensemble because we happen to be a string quartet playing on Western instruments in a traditional Western configuration. But I don't think that we strongly identify as classical musicians. And that's really important, I think, for our generation of artists, is to disidentify with that as a label,
Mhm.
and to move forward in a more collective sense, where we observe all types of music and we love performing all types of music, but genuinely, like, not just because, we're classical musicians who like to play new music, but because
Yeah.
we're musicians and we're artists and we
Mm.
sometimes play classical music. And, like, the primary organizing principle around what we do is artistry and not classical arts. Yeah, and I think that that differentiation is how we stay relevant and how the arts in general stays important in our communities, because we lose so much community support. And this is not just about funding, right? It's about the aesthetic and the recognition of the value of arts as a whole.
Mhm.
And I think that becomes very lost when we're no longer representing and resonating with the people who come to our concerts.
Yeah.
That demographic is shifting so rapidly, shifting too rapidly for us to be bent on being classical musicians?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. The term classical musician is kind of, there is a stigma to it, and there's a
A lot of
certain way people think about
it's a limiting descriptor,
it. Mhm.
and I think
For sure.
most classical musicians in the world break that, you know?
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah, the vast majority of classical musicians are so much more than just a classical musician, but, we get funded by organizations who put those labels, and it's hard to stray away from it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think sticking to one genre is a limiting perspective as an artist.
For sure. No, I totally agree. And I'm very excited to see what you and Poiesis does in the future to help kind of break the canon, break the stigma. I'm very much looking forward to that. So I always like to close with this one question. What advice do you want to give to aspiring professional musicians?
I always get asked this, and it's hard because I don't think I feel like I haven't reached professional musician status yet. Um, it's like, what? Like, I'm, like, 22. Like, basically, like, like, we just won this competition,
Mhm.
and I have a lot of performing experience, but not in the same way as most professionals do, so it's really hard to think about that. But I think we were just I actually, I guess I can speak on behalf of the group for this because we were just answering an interview question like this morning. But I think that the biggest thing is to explore things outside of what you do and to let yourself be immersed in fields, not just genres of music, but fields of study and academics that are far beyond what you think is even related to music, because everything is, and
Mm.
everything that you study will end up going back to it. And I think for a long time in my childhood, I thought that sticking to violin and learning violin and just doing violin was the most important thing for my career. But now I struggle with a lot of things as a result of that. And I wish that I had allowed myself to take lessons and learn other instruments even, or, go into other fields of study and really take more seriously when I was in high school, the other classes I was doing and the other interests that I had in visual arts or athletics and things like that. Those are all really deeply connected to performing arts. And we don't realize how much that's true until you're a professional, I guess. You wish that
Yes.
you had done everything else. But so most of the things that I've learned most in my life have been from non-music endeavors, and most of my improvement in violin I saw correlated directly with when I was studying other things. Yeah, so that was a big piece of advice from that I heard Max and Jasper also both give. And in addition to that, like I would say you just have to work. And the unfortunate reality is that there's a lot of practice time that we all need to do. You just have to grind. And it doesn't necessarily mean, like, just slaving away at your instrument all day, of course. But, part of that is exploring other things, and that's part of the work of being an artist is to be really curious and to be motivated by curiosity. And, yeah, I think that's really essential is just to know that you just need to spend time loving the instrument and loving the genres that you like and music and all of this, and to listen to so many recordings. If you have access to performances, you have to see them. If you have access to lessons, you have to get them. And then you just have to practice and convince yourself that you enjoy it. But that's just inescapable and it's the unfortunate reality. But everything is part of the learning process. And I think framing it that way is also really important.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're totally qualified to give advice. That was great advice.
I don't know. I feel like give me 5 years, maybe.
Okay, 5 years. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. This was an amazing interview, and I loved hearing all of your insights, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is lovely.
Thank you to Sarah Ying Ma for a very engaging interview. I loved hearing how Poiesis chooses their repertoire and her view on new music and how our generation and the ones to come can keep classical music relevant. Thank you so much for joining me on Backstage Classical Career Conversations. If you would like to support this podcast, please leave us a rating and review on the platform you're listening to this on. You can follow us on Instagram at Backstage Classical Podcast, and be sure to tell your friends and family to share these career stories from some of the top musicians in this country. I'm Katrina Stroud, and it was great to see you here. Until next time, stay inspired and listen to the stories of others.